For question 9, the number line shows the yards gained or lost by a team during a football game. Enter the difference in yards between the second down and the third down. Now, to figure out the difference, we're basically finding the absolute value. So we're going to go from the second down to the third down. And we're just going to go negative 2 2/3 minus 5 1/3. Because we're just looking for the distance between the 2 points, so it doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive. So in this case, we know that negative 2 2 2/3 minus 5 1/3, you're really adding. So it would give us a negative 7 3/3, which actually the 3/3 becomes a 1, so then it becomes the absolute value of negative 8, which ends up being positive 8. So that is our answer. For question number 10, which number line model represents the sum of 3/4 plus negative 1.75? Now, as we look at each answer choice, we notice in letter A, they start at 0, and the arrow goes to about the 3/4. But then it's going back, and it only goes back to the negative 1. So if we think about this, 3/4 plus a negative 1.75 is the same thing as saying 0.75 is being subtracted by the 1.75. So we end up with 1.75 minus 0.75, and we end up with 1, but the answer is negative. So here we notice that when this arrow is going back, it ends at negative 1. So letter A is very possibly our answer. Now letter B, it shows us that we start at 0, we go 3/4, but then it's telling us to continue a positive. But we know that since there is subtraction, that it has to go back the other direction to make it subtract. So letter B is not our answer. Letter C, we also notice we start at 0, but this time it takes us further than 3/4. And remember, we start with 3/4, so we only go 0.75, but it takes us longer than 0.75. So C is not the answer either. And finally, for letter D, we notice that they start with subtracting. And again, it's a positive 3/4 that we start with. So the only possible answer we end up with is letter A. Now let's do number 11. The number line shows a set of operations. Select the expression that represents the operation shown on the number line. Now let's take a look at our number line. So if we notice it goes from 0 to 4n, we know that they're counting by 2's, so this would be 8n. And then over here, this would be negative 4n, and this would be negative 8n. So it's good to know that we are just counting by every other value of 4. Now for letter A, it tells us that we are going to start at the origin at 0, and we're going to go to our right 4n, but it shows that this arrow is actually only going all the way to 8n. So then this statement would not necessarily be true. So that would be already incorrect. So we know that letter A cannot be a correct answer. Now for letter B, it does start on 8n. So we're going to notice we go to positive 8n, but then it says it subtracts 2. So we go back, and since we know we're counting by 2's, it goes back to 6n. So 8 minus 2 is 6. So that is correct. But then it subtracts again 14. So we're right now at positive 2n, and if we go all the way to the negative 8, we notice that counts by 2, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So it does actually go all the way to minus 14. So letter B is very possibly our answer. Now for letter C, it says start at the origin with 2n. So we go from the origin to 2n, which would be right here. And we notice the arrow goes even further. It goes to 8n. So C is not our answer. And finally, for letter D, it tells us to start from the origin and go to 16n. Well, the line actually only goes to 8n. So it stops, and it cannot be letter D either. So the only possible solution is letter B. Now for number 12, at a farm, 4 employees harvest 48 pounds of food over a certain number of hours. Each employee works the number of hours shown. Employee A works 6 hours. Employee B works 4 hours. Employee C works 6 hours. And employee D works 8 hours. The number of pounds of food harvested by each employee is proportional to the number of hours worked. Fill in the table with the amount of food in pounds each employee harvested. So there's some key information we do need to pay attention to. There are 4 employees and they harvested 48 pounds of food over a certain number of hours. We know the amount of hours that each one of the employees works. So our goal is to make sure that we find out the amount of food in pounds for each employee, what they harvested. The first thing we're going to want to do is calculate how many total hours that they harvested the 48 pounds. So we're going to add the 6, the 4, the 6, and the 8, and that gives us 24 hours. Now we can set up a proportional relationship, and we realize for the 48 pounds in the 24 hours would be equal to the amount of the employee working hours versus the amount of pounds. So in this case, it would be x over 6, because we know that 24-hour period and employee A worked 6 hours. And then we're going to calculate, based on this, how many pounds they ended up harvesting within their 6-hour period. So we can use the cross product, or we can simplify our fraction. So 48 over 24 would simply give us 2 over 1. So if it's 2 over 1, we can just go 2 over 1 equals x over 6. So this ends up reducing, and it would leave us with 12 pounds. So in this case, for the 6 hours, 12 pounds of food were harvested within that 6-hour period for employee A. Now employee B will still use the reduced fraction, 2 over 1 equals x amount of pounds over 4 hours. So this case, we would do the cross product again, and we'd multiply 2 times 4, and that would give us 8 pounds. And then for employee C, we do the next 2 over 1 equals x over 6, and it turns out they also are going to be harvesting 12 pounds. And finally, for we have 2 over 1 equals the x over 8, and that would give us 16 pounds. If we add it all up, it should end up being 48 pounds altogether. So this is 20, and then we have 28. So 20 plus 28 would give us the 48 pounds. So employee A has 12 pounds harvested, employee B has 8 pounds, employee C has 12 pounds, and employee D has 16 pounds. Now for question 14, we have Emmanuel added 2 integers. Which condition will always give Emmanuel a negative solution when he adds 2 integers? So what we can do here is create our own situation and compare it to each possible solution. So go ahead and think about that. So for letter A, both integers have negative values. So if I were to have negative 2 minus 4, my solution would be negative 6. So in this case, which condition will always give Emmanuel a negative solution when he adds two integers? That would be true. So letter A is a true statement. Now, for both integers to be positive, remember, it's saying that it would give a negative solution. So if I have a positive 2 and a positive 4, that gives me a positive 6. So then that statement would not be true. And for letter C, one integer is positive value and one integer has a negative value. Now, in this situation, it's a little bit tricky because if I have a positive value and I have another negative, then I end up with a negative 2. But if it's reversed, if it's negative 2 and a positive 4, it gives me a positive solution. So then, therefore, it's not a negative solution. So letter C is not a correct answer. And then for letter D, the values of the two integers are opposites. So if you think of it, the two integers are opposites of each other. So if you have a positive 2 and a negative 2, the result is 0. Even if I were to go negative 2, positive 2, the result is still 0. So then letter D cannot be a solution either. So the only possible answer would be the one that we figured out for letter A. So letter A is our only answer.